Hello, my name is Ben Helfon. I am the co-author of Our Happy Divorce, How Ending Our Marriage Brought Us Closer Together. We are excited today to have a guest we've been wanting for a while and been promised for a while. But as always, before I want to introduce Kate Anthony and Susan Guthrie, my trusted co-hosts and the voices of reason. Hi, guys.
Debatable.
Ish.
Yeah.
Reason-ish. So Susan, we've been talking about this person, this man and his work for a while. You bringing up, I think either one of two of you or both of you bringing up every single stream, pretty much. And tell us about who we have today.
Yeah. Well, and I always say, when anybody asks me a question about when they're arguing with their ex or they're having a hard time communicating with their ex or this, that, my answer is always Bill Eddy, Bill Eddy, Bill Eddy. So today we have Bill Eddy. I'm so excited. So who is Bill Eddy? It shouldn't be a big surprise to anybody. Here's Bill. Hi, Bill. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Round of applause.
Just for those who maybe don't understand, I'm sure everyone's heard your name, Bill, but I just want to make sure everyone understands why we're so excited. I always tell, Bill's heard me tell this story when he's been on the podcast before, but back when I was a young attorney, I had a high conflict divorce. I had no idea what I was dealing with, and someone recommended High Conflict People in Legal Disputes to me. This is the book that I bought so many years ago. Since that, it saved my life. It saved my client's life. Since that time, there have been It's All Your Fault, BIFF. If you've heard me say BIFF once, you've heard me say BIFF 1,000 times. And recently, Bill was on Divorce and Beyond talking about the new BIFF, which is a #1 bestseller again. It's for co-parent communication, your guide to difficult co-parent text, emails, and social media posts. This is not an exhaustive list of all of Bill's books. He has many more. The 5 People Who Can Ruin Your Life is another fun one. But bottom line, if you are going through a high conflict divorce or other situation where communication or conflict is a part of the paradigm, Bill understands the paradigm, can help you understand it, whether you are the person going through it or you are the legal, the attorney, the therapist, the coach who's helping the person dealing with it. So again, it's always a thrill to have you here, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Bill. We really appreciate it. And before, I remember Susan, as I said, brought it up at this, I forget which stream we were doing. It was in the beginning, and I was like, what is this BIFF? What is it? I knew nothing about it. So tell us, what is this BIFF, and what does it stand for, and when did you come up with it?
Well, BIFF stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. It's really that easy. Well, let's say it's simple. It's not always easy, because to do that, you have to not do a lot of other things, like say how you feel and make your argument, defend yourself, justify, all of that. So BIFF keeps it really narrow. And so brief is basically like a paragraph usually. Even if you've got an email that's 3 pages long, you've got a text that's all caps, etc. So brief just really keeps it simple and doesn't trigger the other person any more than they're already triggering themselves. Then the I is informative. You want it to have straight information, no opinions, emotions, judgments, defenses, all that stuff. Just something that's information, like who will do what, where, and when. The party will be at 3 o'clock, something like that. And then friendly. So it doesn't have to be super friendly, but give it a friendly tone, like, thanks for responding to my request, or I respect your parenting time, things like that. So you put it in a positive context. And firm doesn't mean harsh. It means that you basically end a hostile conversation. So you don't put any hooks out there to get the other person to keep reacting to you. So brief, informative, friendly, and firm. It's really quite simple, but it's not always easy to do. especially if you're outraged or defensive. And sometimes it's good to wait a couple hours and then start working on it. And it's often a good idea to get another set of eyes to look at it. So that's the nutshell version of BIFF. The brief version.
I guess the question that I just learned this today is you have, first of all, you have alphabet soup of letters behind your name, but one I know because my wife is an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. Which came first, the attorney or the social worker, and how did that help you come up and formulate the BIFF method?
Well, I was a social worker first. And a lot of people don't know, but I was actually a social worker my first year out of college in New York City at a child and family agency. But then I went to graduate school, got a master's in social work, and basically became a child and family counselor. And so from that, I learned I learned many important things, but two key things that influenced me. One is how you think influences how you feel. So I learned that if you write positive things on a piece of paper, even when you're upset, it calms you down. And the other thing I learned is that human beings are part of family systems, that we all influence each other. And so I had that framework before I became a lawyer. And of course, in law, there's a right and a wrong person, right? Well, that's not really true. And I learned as the family counselor that you've got to work with all parts of the system, and that you can change and influence the other person by how you behave. So those are some of the things that I learned. But being the social worker first totally influenced my law practice. Even though I was a social worker therapist for 12 years, and I've been a family lawyer for 28 years, it's still a real combination of the two.
So great. Bill, will you tell the story of how you sort of came up with BIFF? I think it's a fun story.
How BIFF was born.
How BIFF was born. Yeah, that one.
and if anybody wants this, it's written in the front of the BIFF for Co-Parent Communication book. So I met a woman who worked with the Arizona court system, and she had me come and give them a seminar. And we decided, because we both thought the same way, to found High Conflict Institute. And so we set up a series of seminars. And the first seminar was in March of 2007. And it was a 2 or 3 day seminar. And then I was speaking to lawyers, therapists, and there were a couple judges, family law judges in the room. And about halfway through the seminar, one of the judges raised her hand and said, "What are we going to do about these high conflict emails?" And, it's like two people pointing fingers at each other, and it just makes things worse. Well, at that point, I'd been practicing family law for about 15 years, and I was used to rewriting my clients' emails and kind of coaching them on things to not do and what to do. So I hadn't really put it together, but I said, well, the first thing is they really need to be brief. And so like a paragraph instead of, pages and pages, not as long as what you're responding to. And then I said they just need to be informative, and I said they need to be friendly. And so one was writing down, I said, "Oh, that's BIF." And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, if you add another F, you'll have BIFF, like in Back to the Future and Biff Pal, like in comic books and stuff." So I said, "Well, yeah, another F would be easy. It should be firm, because you want it to end the hostile conversation." And so they said they liked that, BIFF. And so after that, we started developing it and teaching it. And I don't know how long a story you want, but if people want to get the book, they can find out what happened when I went to Australia, because BIFF already was a word in Australia. I'll leave it at that.
There you go.
You did bring up I have to respond. Can you talk a little bit about the idea of responding versus reacting, the modes of responding versus reacting?
Yeah, so generally people emotionally react to statements or emails and texts. But what we want to do is teach them to have a BIFF response so that they really think about it. And that's such a key part of all of this, is that you stop and think. And that's what I learned as a therapist, is the way you think influences how you feel. So if you can stop and think and tell yourself, I'm just going to write a BIFF response, I don't have to get upset, then it helps calm yourself down. And as you write, you often find yourself getting calmer. And I know that happens for me because I get to write a lot of BIFF responses too.
Practice what you preach, right?
People also criticize me. I'll get emails or something saying, Bill, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'll say, thank you for your feedback. Let me point you towards this article which addresses the issue you're talking about. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If.
Speaking of emails like that, there's a term that a kind of person that you talk about in a form of high conflict person that you talk about in the book called blame speakers.
Yes. So blame speak is really what you
Nikki,
get.
excuse me.
That's
sorry.
these
That's
angry labeling, you're a such and such, highly emotional, all or nothing, it's all your fault. Yes, there's.
I see the cue card here.
Yeah. And so the idea is blame speak is just really awful. It kicks you in the gut. And so some people are blame speakers. They do this all the time. They're constantly pointing the finger at other people. And one of the big things to know is when somebody's just blaming you for everything, that's a sign that it's not about you, it's about them. Because reasonable people trying to solve a problem don't say it's all your fault. What they say is, here's the problem. And so when someone says, here's the problem, I go, oh, I got to look at my part in this. But when someone says it's all my fault, I go, oh, okay, that's a high conflict blame speaker.
Is there a difference? So there's high conflict situations, and then there are high conflict people, and high conflict. We talk about I think 5 or so high conflict personality disorders. But with divorce, and I'm sure some of the other situations that you deal with, but particularly with divorce, how how do you differentiate against the situation or the person, or and is I guess the chicken or the egg situation? All right.
Yeah. So let's talk about high conflict for a moment. So there's high conflict behavior, and maybe people just get really angry sometimes, or really sad, or really stubborn, or something like that. That happens for most people. But when we see a high conflict pattern of behavior, that I think what you're talking about is the pattern, then we know we're dealing with somebody that needs to be dealt with differently. And the analogy I would give between an ordinary person and a high conflict person is similar to someone who maybe drank too much Saturday night and someone who's an alcoholic. They have to approach alcohol differently. And if you're dealing with a high conflict person, you have to approach them differently. And let me give you 4 quick things to not do with a high conflict person that you might do with everybody else. The first is to try to give them insight into themselves. Now, look, buddy, that thing you do, just cut it out and you'll be so much happier. That doesn't work.
I figured it out. You're a high conflict person.
Read this book.
Right. So the second thing is focus on now. Don't focus on the past, because when you focus on the past, that just blows things up. Third is don't focus on emotions, and that's why BIFF responses are so good. They're just straight information, because emotions just lose control. High conflict people don't have good control of their emotions. And the fourth is don't call them a high conflict person.
Sorry, Bill, I jumped the gun on you there.
That doesn't go over well. So you have to adapt, and that's where BIFF responses can really help you with high conflict people, because they could be outrageous and you're responding in a reasonable way.
Yeah, Bill, when you were on divorce, when you came on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, you were talking about avoiding the 3 A's when you respond to people. And we were saying, because what you get, and maybe we'll read BIFF, this book of BIFF, everyone, has some wonderful scripts in it that show you a high conflict, email, and then how you might respond to it. But, people, when they are faced with those high conflict communications from whomever, their response is to they think they can explain the person out of it. They can give them advice on how to, or tell them they shouldn't be talking like that. So I thought I got a lot of comments from people on the 3 A's.
Oh, good. Yeah, so it's the advice. And when someone's angry with you, sending a hostile email, and high conflict people in general are not interested in your advice. And so all it does is escalate and make things worse. But admonishments, that's like talking to a child and to just say, look, buddy, never ever do that again. And so admonishing them is also going to trigger them. And then the third is counterintuitive, and that's apologies. Now, apologies in general are a really good thing, but they're not good in a BIFF response. And the reason why is you get a hostile email or text, and you send back something that says, I'm sorry I forgot to tell you that little minor thing last week. And what they hear is you agree it's all your fault. And next thing you know, they're saying, look, everybody, see, he admits it's all his fault. And that's not at all what you admitted or I admitted. Right. And I've seen people do that. I've seen them show the other person tried to calm them down by saying, yeah, I know this is my fault and that's my fault. And it absolves the high conflict person. They can now just point the finger at what you yourself wrote there. So we discourage putting those in BIFF responses. There may be a time and place, but not in a BIFF response.
Is there a way to take responsibility that's not an apology, right? Because for many of us, our integrity sort of lies in our ability to take responsibilities. Well, how do you do that?
Well, there's an example in the book, and right now it's not at my fingertips because we have 28 examples. But here's what happened in a conversation. So woman said, I made an appointment with the doctor or something. No, she just said, this is when something will happen. And the man said, how could you leave me out or whatever? And what she wrote back is, oh my goodness, I thought I had told you, but I guess I didn't. And I'm used to always being the one that set up whatever type of appointment that was. And I'll make sure that it doesn't happen again. Never said, I'm sorry, never put that word to get used against her. Instead, this is what happened, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. So that's a way to address the reality without setting yourself up to be criticized.
Bill, we do have a question from YouTube. And what is your experience with blamers and their impact on the children and the family?
Well, it's a negative impact on everybody. And it doesn't really help the blamer either. Blamers stay stuck because they don't look at themselves. They're always blaming other people. What's tragic for children is they learn that when there's a problem, point the finger at somebody, blame somebody, rather than taking responsibility and looking at their part. So it can ripple through. It can ripple through generations. You can have grandparents and cousins. It affects everybody. And And when people generally get along, if you have someone enter a system where people are getting along and respecting each other, who blames and points the fingers, it really throws everybody off.
I don't know how to ask this question without sounding a little flippant, but I'm just going to do it anyways. But if somebody is throwing out diagnosis, I guess somebody without background of personality disorders or blaming, right, or pointing the finger on the other person, who's considered the high conflict person in that situation? If that, I mean, well, I don't know how it's that. This is just a layman question, right? If somebody, of course, there's personality disorders and they're serious and they're like a wrecking ball, but
very good question. And the thing is, remember, it's a pattern of behavior is what high conflict personalities are. Personalities are how we relate, you know, how we think, how we handle feelings, how we behave. So if somebody does that all the time, they go, okay, you're a borderline, you're a narcissist, you're antisocial. They're not taking responsibility. My key lesson about this is don't tell anybody that you think they have a personality disorder, and don't tell anybody you think they have a high conflict personality. Instead, if you suspect this might be the case, adapt what you do. And don't do insight, open emotions, focus on the past, stuff like that. So what it means is change your own behavior, not trying to change the other person. And if they truly have a personality disorder, they're not going to change regardless of what you say. That's right. On them, and it's pretty rare.
That's very
literally in the history of the world, nobody has ever said, "Oh, you think I have antisocial personality disorder? Let me look into that."
Right.
That's really never.
That's so helpful.
Oh my God, thank you.
Well, and Bill, you said actually when we were talking, and I thought this was really profound for people to understand, is when you are responding to one of those communications that gets your ire up, you can decide what kind of response you're going to get with what you put out there. I thought that was like,
Did I talk about that, holding up my extra brain?
You didn't have your extra brain with you at the time.
But now we have visual.
But now we do. So everyone.
Okay, yes. If we're visual today, this is how I see it. And I'm not a neuroscientist, so they may say, Bill, you're overemphasizing the right and left hemisphere. But the scientists that I do attend seminars and read say that the right and left brain think a little differently about conflict. That the left brain thinks more analytically, logically, you know, let's solve this problem, let's plan for the future, let's go step by step, and looks at details. Whereas the right brain is more of a relationship brain. And so this is the part that gets real defensive, protective. And so what triggers which one of these is going to come up? Well, you do, or you can. So if you give a problem-solving answer to somebody, you're going to engage their left brain. If you give a personal attack, you're an idiot, or you do everything wrong, or it's all your fault, you're going to get kind of this defensive, protective response. So basically, you can decide which type of response you want to get by your own actions and your own words, especially.
And I think it's a lot easier to do this. Like, you can take the breath and do this when especially since so much of our communication nowadays is electronic, right? You can take the time to shift yourself out of your reaction and into a BIFF response when it's an email and they're not standing in front of you.
Exactly. And that's the key, because people come at you as an adversary. And if you just respond reasonably, it's like it's real hard to, fight with Jello. Um, and so don't give a hostile response. And ideally, you're giving positive information. You're giving a thank you or have a good weekend or, I know this was a hard time. Whatever phrase, doesn't have to be a lot, but something that turns it into let's work together instead of to fight each other.
I think it was, we had a guest on, I think it was Sheva, who was talking about the emotional boomerang game, right? And if you're playing the emotional boomerang or playing catch, you always have the option of putting down the boomerang and not throwing it back, or putting down the baseball and not throwing it back. So how can, sort of one person change the dynamic of an interaction using or can one person change the interaction using BIFF, and if so, how?
Absolutely, you can. And we're getting feedback now that people who are writing BIFF format a lot to someone who's sending a lot of angry text and emails, that the other person starts using the same BIFF approach, even though they don't know what it is, because it looks better. And as some people like to say, which would you rather be associated with if you were in family court? The emails, because the emails that are blaming or the emails that are BIFF. So that would be the key.
Mm-hmm.
We do have another question here, which is great. Please help me understand how to communicate feelings or experiences that result from behavior of others without blaming or finger pointing.
Well, one thing is really trying to focus on the future. And I think where people get stuck is they want to go over the past and say, that thing you did last week, that really bothered me, it really hurt me, whatever. And what I suggest is don't go into last week. Say, you know what, if you want to in the future communicate with me about the school concerts or something like that, just send me an email ahead of time, okay? And then I can go look up the information at the school. It totally skips the negativity of talking about the past, because when you say, you didn't tell me about that with enough time, it just triggers anger and hurt feelings back and forth, instead of, look, here's what I really want is for the future to have this work better.
Susan or Kate, you want?
Yeah, well, I saw there was another question here that I think is interesting. How do you handle a situation when the other person has done something wrong or hurtful? Is addressing what they've done considered blame? For example, if someone continually speaks over me to the point where I don't feel heard or validated, if I bring it to their attention that their habit of dominating the conversation, interrupting and speaking over me makes me feel unheard, or that my voice is not important, am I finger pointing?
It depends on how you deal with it. So here's what I recommend. What you're really talking about is setting limits on undesirable behavior. And the way to set limits on undesirable behavior is to say what you want and say what you're going to do if they don't do what you want. So I think of a case I represented a mom, and the dad had been abusive, and he represented himself. And so I had to negotiate with him in their divorce. So he'd call me out and say, Bill, you tell that blankety blank blank that such and such about the kids. And I'll say, whoa, whoa, whoa. If you're going to talk like that about my client, I'm going to hang up. So don't talk like that, and I'll keep going. If you do keep talking, if you choose to keep talking like that, I'm going to hang up. And so he said, well, I'll talk anyway, blah, 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 blah. And I said, okay, you've chosen to have me hang up. So call me back when you're ready to talk civilly. And I hung up. The next day, he calls me back and he says, do you tell that? Blah, blah. And I said, I'm going to hang up if you talk like that. He said, no. I'll try not to. And after that, he tried to not talk like that. So that's setting limits without pointing fingers. Just saying you have a choice and here's my consequence. See, an important point here is we can't control other people's behavior, but we can control our response to other people's behavior.
If yeah, I mean,
that's such a good one.
It's such a good one. If anyone in my, in my group or my clients are watching this right now, when I talk about boundaries, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
They are yours. They're not the other person's. So if he's going to still be calling and talking to his about, his ex-wife in that manner, your response is to hang up the phone. And you have to follow through on your boundaries, right? You can't then get into a conversation about like, I told you I was going to hang up if you continued. No, then you hang up.
That's a very good point, as people turn everything into an argument, and that undermines setting limits.
Yeah.
It's setting limits is about behavior, not the best argument.
Yes.
Very true.
I want to go back to the other question, because I also think that it's interesting. I think the real question is, what do you want out of that relationship, right? If somebody is continuing to hurt you by speaking over you and you feel, as you said, unvalidated and unseen, it depends on, like, if you're ending the relationship, just know that you're not validated and you're not seen, and trying to get someone that you're divorcing or that, it's not going to happen, right? So you have to let that go. But if it's someone you're continuing a relationship with and like you're trying to like save the marriage, then you're going to want to keep it in I language, not like you're always interrupting me, you don't validate me, right? Everything should be about like, when you interrupt me, I feel triggered, and it reminds me of when I was a kid and like my dad was like barreling over me, something like that opens their stream of empathy, as opposed to like, you did this and you did that and you did, because nobody can hear that ever. But I think I don't know if anyone agrees or wants to comment on that, but I just think it depends on what you want out of the relationship at this point. Right?
Totally right. Let me just add, if you're deciding to end the relationship, don't go into all those things that are wrong and all those things that should have been done this way. Is step by step end the relationship or reduce the relationship. And so many people want to explain. Now, the reason I'm splitting up with you is because of you did this and you did that. And that just brings you into a deeper fight, and you're never moving away. It's hard, but people have to get outside support and stop trying to get something they can't get from this other person.
So in that space, we actually, this is good. We do have a question that's sort of in that transition of the beginning of the divorce, and it says, how do you deal with somebody who's saying they don't want to, don't want to see the kids if you choose divorce, as it will hurt them too much? In essence, he's putting up a boundary that will impact the kids? ? Is he putting up a boundary that will impact the kids?
Yeah, I couldn't hear quite all of that. Who's putting up the boundary?
That's not a boundary. That's a threat.
Yeah,
that's a manipulative threat. That is not a boundary. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Rage. The husband is threatening to not see the children if she goes forward with the divorce.
Oh, that's so familiar. And there's a few things about that. One is people really shouldn't say that, but some people do. And it's not the reality. I know when I've gotten new clients as a family lawyer, they come in and they say the other person's either not going to see the kids or is going to try to prevent me from ever seeing the kids again. And so I say, look, people say that at the beginning, and it's not what's happening. And so it's extremely rare. It's common people say that, and very rare that actually is implemented. And so kind of peeling people off the ceiling. And part of it, as a family lawyer, is letting people know the realities, what the law says about these things, that both parents should have a substantial relationship with the child and children, things like that. So a lot of it's information, but part of it is trying to not react, response rather than an emotional reaction.
Ooh, that one gets really hot under the collar there.
You can see the
Yeah.
color rising up
You know,
on your throat.
Right.
Billy-
And my guess is that I think, is Bill frozen in
He's
our,
frozen a little bit. Can you still hear us, Bill?
so
I
weird.
hear you. Do you hear
Yeah.
me?
We can hear
But
you. Yeah, you're
I
just
don't
you're a
seem
little
to be-
frozen. And, oh, there you go. You're back.
Okay.
Well, so I mean, the thing about that too is that, you know, I, I am not a family law attorney, but we have two of them here. And my guess is that the court doesn't really look favorably upon a parent who threatens to abandon their children if their wife, you know, has the gall to assert herself as a human being with rights to divorce. Am I
Oh,
That is-
absolutely.
you're right about that?
Yeah,
And
I
that's-
think it's a basic rule. Just don't weaponize your kids, right? I mean, that's probably.
Well, yes. And so, I mean, I guess it also begs the question, how do you handle someone who is weaponizing the kids?
Yeah.
Well, that's a big setting limits, and sometimes it does require court involvement. Although a good BIFF, what would be a good BIFF for that? Probably a good BIFF would be to say something like, you know, I know you're upset, but we're going to figure this out, and let's stay calm, and let's plan to meet with a divorce mediator. You talk to a lawyer, I'll talk to a lawyer. But I understand that we're going to be sharing the kids. So have a nice day. Something like that. Maybe
Well,
not quite that way.
Well, could you say something? Because you said something else when we were talking the other day about the difference between I'm sorry you feel that way and I'm saddened you feel that way. And the minute I read this, I was thinking this question that the viewer had. I was thinking something along the lines of, I'm saddened that you feel that way, but that is your choice. You know, I would, you know, something along those lines, as opposed to pointing out that we're working on this together, if it's truly a high conflict.
Yeah, I saying I'm saddened is a way to avoid sounding like you're apologizing, because you're not. When you say I'm saddened that this is how it feels to you, and I know that the children are very important to you and that you're very important to the children. So let's look at what the next step should be so we can do this peacefully for their benefit.
Yeah.
That would be my BIFF.
Right.
The other thing that, you know, because I work with clients on that conversation, having the divorce conversation is a huge part of what I do in my work. And what I say is, when, you know, I always say that, like, if you're telling someone you're getting divorced, no matter how long you have been telling them that you want to get a divorce, the day that you say it is like, it's new information for them, right? Susan, you have to jump off. Is that what
Yeah, I apologize, guys. I have to jump off. The movers that's all the dog barking. So I apologize that I can't stay for the last 15 minutes. But thank you so much, Bill, for being here. And I know you guys I'll watch the last 15 in the replay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan.
Bye, guys.
All right, we're gonna have to do something on the fly. We're gonna have to do something on the fly here. So just bear with me for a second. And
you have to reconfigure all your.
I got to reconfigure it because it kicks her out. So there we go. We should be fine now. So we're just gonna be a little different right now.
So, I mean, I was just saying that, like, you know, no matter how long you've been thinking about this or talking about it, the second you say it, it's new information to the person who's receiving the information, right? And so if someone is so angry that they're like threatening the kids, this is not the time to be making decisions about co-parenting. This is a time to say, I understand that you're really upset about this, and you probably need a little bit more time to process this. So I'm gonna give you your space. We have a lot of decisions that we have to make coming down the pike. This is probably not the time to make them, right? Because you can't engage with that. Right? You can't like start arguing like, well, that would never fly in court and yada, 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 yada.
You're talking to the wrong brain, you know, because this one's offline and this one's reacting.
Right. Exactly.
They can't hear problem solving. So you just need to end that conversation and save it. But say that in a calm way so that they calm down some. Say, look, I want to work this out with you. I want us to co-parent. It's in the best interest of the kids, and I value your relationship with the children. And often people don't know that. And so hearing that's really helpful.
So we had talked about, I think in the book, if I'm right, there were 28 examples of real life examples, and we talked about before the stream about actually letting people know the difference between a BIFF response, appropriate BIFF response, and a non-BIFF response. And Kate, I think you were going to read one.
Well,
Sure.
we're going to role play, Ben.
Role play? Oh, I don't have it in front of me. So.
That's right.
Wait, you have it in front of you?
No.
Sure. Do you have the book?
I have it. So Bill, would you like to role play with me?
Sure.
Page
Whoa.
133?
This is the first. This is great.
Taking our live stream to a new level.
Yeah, the whole new level.
Which one we want to do here? Let's see.
Did you have
All
one?
right, let's do
Okay.
this one, page 83.
83.
83. Okay. Okay, so Carlos
Do you want to be Carlos or Maria?
why don't you be Carlos and I'll be Maria.
Okay. So here I am. So when I got Junior today, he had an ear infection and needed to be taken to the doctor. The doctor said it was obvious he got sick at your house over the weekend and you did nothing about it, all caps. He prescribed antibiotics, which you will need to make sure he takes twice a day in his ear. I'm sending the bottle with him to school tomorrow, so make sure he has it in his backpack when you pick him up. Once again, you have been, all caps, irresponsible about Junior's health care, and I have to clean up after your irresponsibility. I will discuss this with my lawyer and decide whether to return to court to reduce your parenting time for the health and safety of our son.
Okay.
A non-BIFF response.
That's not a BIFF communication.
That's not a BIFF communication, and I cannot tell you how often I hear these communications in my community, like all the time. Okay, so
hers is a BIFF response or not?
Well, the next one is one she's thinking of sending.
Okay.
But we're not sure. So let's hear it and then decide if that's a good one or if she should do a better one.
Okay. Thank you for taking Junior to the doctor. I will follow the directions for his medication. I was not irresponsible with Junior, and he had no signs of an ear infection while with me. As you may know, those symptoms can come on very quickly. I'm fairly sure the doctor did not tell you that he obviously got this ear infection while with me. I will keep you advised of Junior's condition while he is with me.
So I would say, yeah, I mean, from the person who's has no initials behind their names and is new to the BIFF world, there's one part of that would lead me to say that's not necessarily a BIFF response, because I mean, it was friendly. I think it was relatively brief, but it was a little too justification or informative or explaining why they did what they did. So I'm going to go with no. Not a full BIFF response.
I would agree. I agree, Ben, totally with your analysis that when she says, I was not irresponsible, she's being defensive, not informative.
Right.
Yep.
So it had some BIFF, but just not all the initials. I don't think it had the informative or maybe the brief part. But it
wasn't as friendly.
Yeah. I think the part, it wasn't, the part where she says, I'm pretty sure the doctor didn't tell you that.
Right.
Right.
It's like maybe a little, like we know that. We don't need to point that out. We know that.
Exactly. So why don't you read the top of 88, which is a shorter version, taking out The irresponsible and taking out, I'm sure the doctor didn't say that.
Carlos, thank you for taking Junior to the doctor. I will follow the directions for his medication. Junior had no signs of an ear infection while with me. As you may know, those symptoms can come on very quickly. I will keep you advised of Junior's condition while he is with me.
What do you think? What do you think, Ben?
I think it's amazing what happens, quite frankly, when you take out just a little, I don't want to call them digs, but a little not helpful narrative. So I think that, you know, it is pretty clear.
It feels totally different.
Mm-hmm.
It's just straightforward. That's good, straight, informative, friendly, firm. It ends the conversation.
And so how do you, it's got to be something, again, they're situational, and I think in general, divorce is a high conflict situation. I mean, nobody leaves a marriage. I know Nikki and I didn't leave our marriage on a winning streak, emotionally, physically, spiritually, or anything. So, you know, it's high conflict by nature. So how, obviously the personality disorders, we're dealing with a high conflict person. Is this a practice, I guess, making perfection sort of thing? People learn the BIFF technique? Or is there, I know there's a workbook in the thing, but how can they sort of, what's the checklist when they're looking at their email to go through and not say, okay, this is, and at the same time not overthink it, right? Because I think I do that. I did that a lot in the beginning, is like checking every word and making sure everything was perfect. And so how can people slowly learn the technique?
Yeah, so we have a coaching chapter. It's chapter 11 in the book, next to the last chapter. And we talk about 10 questions. The first 4 we've already talked about. Is it brief? Is it informative? Is it friendly? Is it firm? Then we talk about the 3 A's. Does it contain any advice? Because we don't want that. Any admonishments? We don't want that. Any apologies? Not a good idea. So that's 7 questions. The 8th question is, how do you think the other person will respond? Kind of try to picture that and see, is there anything in here that may not be necessary or may push some extra buttons? Just try to picture how that person's going to respond. And it may be they're going to respond with anger or upset, regardless of what you do. But if you keep doing these at a minimum level, it may eventually calm the situation. The 9th question is, now, is there anything you would take out, add, or change? And that's like the discussion we just had, taking out about irresponsible, and I'm sure the doctor didn't say that. And what you can do if you're coaching somebody is don't tell them you should take that out. Say, read it with that and read it without it and decide which one sounds better. Because the BIFF writer is the one you want to have learn the method. And then question 10 is, should you have somebody else look at it? Mm-hmm. And so if you're coaching somebody, you could say, do you want me to tell you what I think? And that way, so if it's a lawyer, they can help their client with that. If it's a friend, friends can help. This is such a simple method. People can teach their relatives, their friends, their coworkers. In fact, we hear so much that somebody says, oh, the day after I learned that, a friend said, what do you think? And I coached them on the BIFF method. So it's very easy to learn and easy to teach, or simple to learn and simple to teach. It's not always easy to practice, especially when you're upset, but you can learn and it gets easier with practice.
Yeah. And this is literally like in the book, look at this. There's the 10 questions. Boom. Right? This book is, it is not, it makes it very simple. I think one of the beauties of this book is that this is a really complicated time in people's lives, and things can feel overwhelming and difficult. And this book is not overwhelming, and it is not difficult to consume. And I think that's a really important thing to point out, and something that I think is amazing about this book, Bill.
Well, yeah, to use another acronym, right? KISS, Keep it simple,
Yeah.
stupid, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the simpler the better, especially with high conflict situations. And one thing that I just want to say for somebody who I don't consider myself a high conflict person, but I think, you know, going through a divorce as a man, it probably looked and smelt and felt like I was a high conflict personality. But what I see in this this method is that it doesn't necessarily, I guess when I first read about it in high conflict people and personality, this has nothing to do, this works for high conflict situations, you know, just as well as for high conflict people or dealing with high conflict people. And that's what's so impressive.
Yes. So just anybody who's upset, do a BIFF response. You don't have to diagnose them, analyze them. You can do this with anybody.
Yeah.
But you can't do, you know, blaming and try for insight and focus on the past if they're high conflict people. So when in doubt, use a BIFF.
So one of the just other things that I've had to do before I read the BIFF method, but and I don't know if it sort of goes along with this, but is putting an email in a drafts folder and not immediately typing it and pushing send. Is that sort of like having somebody else read it or just not sending it right away?
I think it's helpful to do that, setting it aside. Some people type their angry response and then put it away. I suggest that people handwrite their angry response, so there's no chance they'll accidentally bump send.
Yeah. It also has there's a direct brain, you know, to hand when you're handwriting. It's more of a direct.
What's interesting is it's really the left brain, because that's where most people are right-handed and your brain runs the opposite side of your body. So your right brain, let me get this right. So if you're right-handed, it's the left brain. And so the left brain's for languages. And so you're already putting the person into their problem-solving frame of mind.
Interesting. But
Yeah.
for left-handed people, it's they're screwed basically.
Oh,
Now,
don't marry a left-handed. Nikki's lefty, by the way.
I
My
looked into that, and they say about 3/4 of left-handed people have the same left and right brain. So for some reason, when they're writing with their left hand, it's also running in the reading, writing, talking, listening, problem-solving left brain. So I don't understand it, but for most left-handed people, it's the same.
Maybe their brains are put on.
Or maybe writing is done that way because writing is language.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
But anyways, I have a contract with Kate and Susan to only run an hour. Otherwise, I have to pay them overtime. So, Bill, let people know how they can get in touch with you. The book sold, or the books, I should say. It's not 1, 2, or 3. This is the third in the BIFF series, but there's 42 others. Is that right?
Well, there's about 20 books altogether on high conflict. Some of them are manuals for parenting, for workplace, etc. But anyway, highconflictinstitute.com is the best way to see what our resources are, to get in touch with us. We have free articles, so anybody can get those. The books are generally inexpensive. Most of them are under $20. We have video training, we have consultation, all of that. They can also get the books anywhere, through any bookstore, through Amazon, or through our website. Most of the books are also ebooks, so you can get them as paperbacks or as ebooks. But that's how to contact us, highconflictinstitute.com.
And on social media, is that High Conflict Institute? Everything?
Yeah, so we have, and I don't understand the mechanics, but we're on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. So we have a presence there. We've got a couple people that understand social media. They're younger than me, and they've built up. I think we have about 10,000 followers. So it's exciting, and we love teaching and sharing.
Well, it
You also
is
have an
phenomenal.
Instagram,
What's
by
that?
I was saying they also have an Instagram.
Well,
Yes.
it is phenomenal stuff. And actually, before we say bye, this is how we can reach Kate Anthony. What happened here?
You have it right.
Sorry. No. I thought we went offline for a second there. Kate Anthony is Divorce Survival Guide on podcast, and then kateanthony.com, and Susan, Divorce in a Better Way, and Divorce and Beyond podcast, and Our Happy Divorce, everything at Our Happy Divorce. Bill, thank you. I mean, it's phenomenal, and this should be screened from the rooftops. And it's not, everybody should learn this method before they go see their lawyer, actually, or go through the divorce process.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you, and we'll be back next week. Kate, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Fun role play.
Thank you.